I never believed in curses, not until the ground opened beneath me, and I fell into darkness so complete it felt like falling through the void itself. My name is Daniel Cross, and I was just an archaeologist's assistant, 28 years old, desperately trying to make rent in Cairo while cataloging pottery shards that nobody cared about. Dr. Ahmadi had hired me for the summer expedition into the Western Desert, promising it would be routine work, mapping a series of minor tombs that had been looted centuries ago. Nothing special, nothing dangerous, just documentation and measurements under the merciless Egyptian sun. I should have known better when the local guides refused to approach the site, their faces drawn tight with fear, muttering prayers under their breath as they pointed toward the distant cliff face, where the tomb entrance yawned like a hungry mouth. Dr. Ahmadi dismissed their superstitions with a wave of his weathered hand, but I saw something in their eyes that made my stomach clench, something primal and ancient that went beyond folklore. We set up camp at dusk, and I volunteered for the first survey of the entrance, eager to prove myself useful, to show that I was more than just someone who carried equipment and took notes. The tomb entrance was different from the others I had seen, carved not with the usual hieroglyphs celebrating a pharaoh's victories, but with warnings, stern-faced gods holding up their hands in gestures that clearly meant stop, turn back, do not enter. The stone itself seemed wrong, darker than the surrounding limestone, almost black, and it was cold to the touch, despite the desert heat that still radiated from the ground. I set up my equipment just inside the entrance, my headlamp cutting through the darkness, revealing a descending corridor that seemed to go on forever. The walls lined with more warnings, more gods with their palms raised. I should have listened, should have felt the wrongness of it all, but instead, I felt only the thrill of discovery, the possibility that this might be something significant after all. I was checking the stability of the floor when it happened, when the stone beneath my feet simply crumbled away, as if it had been waiting thousands of years for exactly this moment. I fell, screaming, my voice echoing in the shaft as I dropped into blackness, my arms flailing uselessly, my mind racing through all the ways this would kill me, the impact that would shatter my bones, leave me broken and alone in the dark. But the impact never came, not the way I expected. I hit something soft, almost liquid, that caught me like a cushion and then released me onto hard stone. I lay there, gasping, my headlamp flickering, throwing wild shadows across walls that seemed to pulse with their own light, a faint blue-green phosphorescence that came from the stone itself. I was in a chamber, vast and circular, the ceiling lost in shadows far above, the walls covered in hieroglyphs that moved, or seemed to move, in the uncertain light, telling a story I couldn't read but felt in my bones. At the center of the chamber stood a sarcophagus, unlike any I had ever seen. Not the usual stone box, but something carved from a single piece of black crystal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. And it was open, the lid lying beside it in perfect pieces, as if it had been carefully removed from within. I approached slowly, every instinct screaming at me to run, to find a way back up that shaft, to get out of this place that felt wrong in ways I couldn't articulate. The sarcophagus was empty except for wrapping, ancient linen that had somehow remained intact, still white, still pristine, arranged in a pattern that suggested a human form but with something off about the proportion, too tall, too slender, limbs that seemed to go on just a bit too long. I reached out, drawn by a compulsion I didn't understand, and touched the linen. It was warm. The entire chamber exploded with light, blinding blue-white radiance that forced me to my knees, my hands over my eyes, and I heard a sound like wind rushing through a canyon, like breath being drawn after an eternity of stillness, and then a voice, clear and crystalline, and speaking directly into my mind in a language I shouldn't have understood, but did. At last, the voice said, filled with such longing and hunger that it made my chest ache. At last, I breathe again. The light faded, leaving spots dancing across my vision, and when I could see again, she was standing before me, risen from the wrappings that now lay scattered and empty on the chamber floor. She was tall, impossibly tall, at least 7 feet. her form wrapped in bandages that moved like living things, unwinding and rewinding across her body in patterns that were hypnotic and disturbing. Her skin, what I could see of it, was the color of tarnished gold, metallic and smooth, catching the phosphorescent light and throwing it back in shades of amber and bronze. Her face was perfection and nightmare combined, features too symmetrical to be human, cheekbones that could cut glass, lips full and dark as dried blood, and eyes that were entirely black. No whites, no iris, just endless depth that seemed to contain galaxies. Her hair was not hair, but something like strands of obsidian that floated around her head as if she were underwater, each strand moving independently, writhing slowly. She wore what might have been jewelry once, but the metals had fused with her skin, golden bands around her arms and throat, a crown of sharp points that grew from her temple and across her chest. Partially hidden by the moving bandages, I could see inscriptions carved directly into her flesh, glowing faintly with the same blue-green light as the walls. "You," she said, and her voice was like honey and poison, sweet and deadly. "You are the first breath of the new age, the first to wake me from the prison of silence." I tried to speak, but my throat was closed with fear, my body paralyzed as she moved closer, her movements fluid and predatory, like a cat approaching prey. She circled me, and I could smell her, an ancient scent of myrrh and something else, something darker, like blood and smoke. "Do you know what you have done, little mortal?" she asked, and there was amusement in her voice, dark and cruel. "Do you know what door you have opened?" I managed to shake my head, still unable to form words, and she laughed, a sound that echoed through the chamber and seemed to come from everywhere at once. "I am Neheb-Kara," she said, "she who commands the breath, guardian of the threshold between life and death. And I have been sealed in this tomb for 3,000 years, bound by the magic of those who feared my power, who feared what I could become. But the seals weaken with time, and you, my sweet finder, you have broken the last of them with your touch, your living warmth against the cold wrappings. You have given me your breath, and now we are bound." She reached out and touched my face with fingers that were cold and hard as stone, tracing the line of my jaw. And where she touched me, I felt a burning sensation that was not entirely painful. "Bound?" I finally managed to whisper, my voice cracking. "What do you mean, bound?" Her smile was terrible and beautiful, revealing teeth that were slightly too pointed, slightly too white. "Your life is mine now, little mortal. You woke me. You fed me your essence, and I have drunk deeply. You cannot leave this place without my permission, cannot die without my agreement. You are my anchor to this world, my first servant, my sacred obligation. Where you go, I can follow. What you feel, I can taste. We are linked now, soul to soul, breath to breath." Panic surged through me, and I tried to run, stumbling away from her, but the chamber seemed to shift around me, the walls moving, the floor tilting, and no matter which direction I ran, I found myself back at the center, back facing her. She hadn't moved, just watched with those black eyes that saw everything, that stripped away every pretense and laid bare every fear. "There is no escape," she said softly. "Not for you, not for me. We are bound by the old magic, the magic that predates the pharaohs, that comes from the time when gods walked among mortals and took what they desired. You belong to me now, Daniel Cross." The sound of my name in her mouth was obscene and intimate, and I realized she knew everything about me, had drunk it from my essence when I touched the wrappings, had pulled my memories and thoughts and secrets into herself. "What do you want from me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to find some anchor of rationality in this nightmare. "Want?" she repeated, tilting her head in a gesture that was almost human, almost curious. "I want what was taken from me. I want my kingdom restored, my temples rebuilt, my worshippers returned. I was a goddess once, before the priests grew jealous, before they bound me and buried me and tried to erase my name from history. I was worshipped across 1,000 miles of desert, and mortals brought me offerings of gold and blood and breath, the sacred breath that sustains all life. I was beautiful and terrible, and I will be again. And you, my first servant, you will help me." She moved with impossible speed, crossing the distance between us in a blink, and her hand closed around my throat, not squeezing, just holding, her cold fingers against my pulse. "Your world has forgotten the old gods," she whispered, her face inches from mine, her breath surprisingly sweet. "But I will remind them. Through you, I will walk in the light again, and those who buried me will know what it means to face the wrath of Nehebkara." She released me and stepped back, and I fell to my knees, gasping, my hand going to my throat where I could still feel the imprint of her fingers, cold spots that seemed to burn. "But first," she continued, her voice returning to that terrible gentleness, "first, you must understand what you have become, what this bond means. Come, let me show you my world, the world beneath the world, the kingdom of the forgotten dead." She gestured, and the walls of the chamber began to change, the hieroglyphs glowing brighter, and I realized they weren't just decoration, but a map, a guide to something vast and complex that extended far beyond this single chamber. The floor beneath me trembled, and sections of stone slid away, revealing passages that led deeper, spiraling down into the earth. "This tomb is but the entrance," Nehebkara said, her voice filled with pride. "Below lies my true domain, the Undertemple, where my priests served me, where my power was cultivated and stored, where the secrets of life and death were studied and mastered. It has been sealed for so long, waiting for the day when someone would finally break the wards and allow me to reclaim what is mine." She began walking toward one of the newly revealed passages, and I felt a compulsion to follow, a pulling sensation in my chest that was physical and impossible to resist. My legs moved without my permission, carrying me after her into the darkness, and as we descended, the air grew colder, thicker, heavy with the weight of ages. The passage walls were lined with alcoves, and in each alcove stood a statue, life-sized figures of men and women in poses of worship or terror or ecstasy, their faces frozen in expressions so realistic I expected them to move. But as we passed, I realized with horror that they weren't statues at all, but mummies, preserved bodies standing upright, their eyes replaced with gems that gleamed in the phosphorescent light, their mouths open as if caught mid-scream or mid-prayer. "My congregation," Nehebkara said, noticing my revulsion, "those who served me willingly, who gave themselves to my power, who sought to transcend mortality through devotion, they stand eternal vigil, their souls bound to this place, waiting for my return. They feel everything, you know. They are aware, trapped in flesh that no longer obeys them, conscious through all the centuries of darkness. That is the gift I gave them, the blessing of eternal service." I felt bile rise in my throat, horror and disgust warring with the strange fascination I couldn't deny. There was something magnetic about her, something that drew me despite every rational instinct screaming to flee. She was death and beauty intertwined, power that was both seductive and repulsive, and I was caught in her orbit, like a planet around a dark star. We emerged into another chamber, larger than the first, a vast hall supported by columns carved to look like reaching hands, their fingers intertwined overhead to form the ceiling. At the far end stood a throne, massive and imposing, carved from the same black crystal as the sarcophagus, and behind it, covering the entire wall, was a mural that depicted scenes of worship and sacrifice, of a goddess receiving offerings from an endless line of supplicants, of cities burning and armies kneeling, of a power so absolute that it reshaped the world itself. Nehebkara approached the throne and sat, her posture regal and commanding, and the moment she settled into it, the entire chamber came alive with light, the columns glowing, the floor illuminating with patterns that formed a complex mandala around the throne. And I heard sounds, whispers in a language that predated any I knew, voices chanting in unison, building in volume and intensity until the air itself seemed to vibrate. "Do you feel it?" she asked, her voice cutting through the chanting, "the power that still resides here, waiting, dormant, but not dead. This is what they feared, what they tried to destroy by sealing me away. But power like this cannot be destroyed, only contained. And the container was always meant to break eventually. Time is my ally, Daniel Cross, and patience is the virtue of the eternal. I stood before her throne, unable to move, unable to look away, and I felt something changing inside me, something fundamental shifting, as if her presence was rewriting parts of who I was at a cellular level. My heart beat in rhythm with the chanting, my breath synchronized with hers, and I realized the bond she had spoken of was deepening, becoming more than just magical compulsion, becoming something that went to the core of my existence. "What are you doing to me?" I managed to ask, fighting against the panic that threatened to overwhelm me. "Making you ready," she replied, rising from the throne and descending the steps toward me. "You cannot serve me as you are, weak and fragile and mortal. The bond requires you to be more, to be a vessel worthy of my power, a conduit through which I can extend my influence into the world above. Don't worry, you won't lose yourself, not entirely. You'll still be Daniel Cross, but you'll be enhanced, improved, made into something greater than you were." She placed her hand over my heart, and I felt heat blooming under her palm, spreading through my chest, racing along my veins like liquid fire. I screamed, the pain overwhelming, but through the agony, I felt something else, a rush of vitality, of strength, of senses expanding beyond their normal limits. The world became sharper, more vivid, colors I had never seen before bleeding into my vision, sounds I couldn't have heard before reaching my ears, the whispers of the mummies in their alcoves, the grinding of stone deep in the earth, the beating of Nehebkara's heart if she even had one, a rhythm that was slower than any human pulse, deep and resonant like a drum in a cathedral. When she finally removed her hand, I collapsed, my body shaking, sweat pouring from me despite the cold of the chamber. I looked at my hands and saw faint patterns etched into my skin, symbols that glowed with the same blue-green light as the wall, marking me as hers, as change. "What have you made me?" I gasped, staring at the marks that seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat. "A servant," she said simply, "a priest of the old ways, a bridge between the dead and the living. You will find that you are stronger now, faster, harder to kill. You will need these gifts for what is to come. The world above has changed much since I was sealed away, and we will need to navigate it carefully if we are to reclaim my dominion without being destroyed by those who would oppose us." She turned away, moving toward another passage at the side of the chamber, and again I felt the compulsion to follow, my legs obeying her unspoken command. We walked through corridors that seemed to shift and change, rooms filled with artifacts that defied explanation, objects of power that hummed with latent energy, scrolls that unrolled themselves as we passed, revealing texts that wrote themselves in real time, recording our passage through this forgotten place. We came to a chamber filled with water, a vast underground lake that stretched beyond the reach of the phosphorescent light, its surface perfectly still, reflecting the chamber ceiling like black glass. At the edge of the lake stood a boat, ancient and ornate, its prow carved into the shape of a serpent's head, its sides painted with scenes of journeys through the underworld. "The river of forgetting," Nehebkara said, gazing out over the dark water. "One of the sacred waterways that connects the world of the living to the world of the dead. My priests used to navigate these waters, carrying messages between realms, bringing back knowledge from those who had passed beyond the veil. The river still flows, still connects, and it will be our path to the surface, to the world that has forgotten me." She stepped into the boat with impossible grace, and I followed, having no choice, the compulsion too strong to resist. The moment my foot touched the boat's deck, it began to move, gliding across the water without oars or visible means of propulsion, heading toward the distant darkness. The journey across the lake was silent, except for the soft sound of water against the hull. And as we traveled, I began to see things moving beneath the surface, shapes that were almost human, but not quite, figures that swam alongside the boat, their faces pale and bloated, their eyes empty and accusing. Some reached up as if trying to grab the boat's edge, their fingers breaking the surface tension, causing ripples that seemed to form words or symbols that faded as quickly as they appeared. The drowned ones, Nehebkara explained, noticing my fascination and horror. Those who died in water and whose souls were never properly guided to the afterlife. They exist in a state between life and death, aware but unable to move on, trapped in the water that claimed them. They are drawn to this river, to the power that flows through it, hoping that proximity to the sacred might grant them release. It never does, of course. Without the proper rituals, without a priest to guide them, they remain forever in this liminal state. I watched as one of the figures, a woman with long hair that floated around her like seaweed, came close enough that I could see her face clearly, could see the desperation in her waterlogged features, the silent plea for help that she could not voice. Then she sank back into the depths, and another took her place, and another, an endless parade of the lost and forgotten. The boat eventually reached the far shore, grinding gently against a stone dock that looked like it had been carved from the living rock. Beyond the dock, another passage led upward, carved with different symbols now, not the warnings and prohibitions of the entrance, but invitations, promises of power and knowledge and transformation for those who dared to descend into the goddess's domain. We walked for what felt like hours, though time had lost all meaning in this underground realm, climbing gradually, the passages sometimes so narrow we had to turn sideways to pass through. Other times, opening into vast caverns filled with wonders and horrors in equal measure. I saw a chamber where the walls were made entirely of bone, human bone, arranged in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly, their complexity suggesting meaning that my enhanced mind could almost grasp, but not quite. I saw a room filled with crystals that sang when we entered, harmonizing in tones that brought tears to my eyes and filled me with emotions I couldn't name. I saw a garden, impossible and beautiful, where plants grew without sunlight, their flowers glowing, their fruits gleaming like gems, and Nehebkara plucked one and offered it to me, and when I ate it, I tasted everything I had ever loved and lost, every memory of joy and sorrow, compressed into a single flavor that lingered on my tongue for hours afterward. "You are adapting well," she said, her voice holding something that might have been approval. "Most mortals who receive my mark lose their minds within hours, unable to cope with the expansion of their sense, the opening of their perception to the layers of reality that normally remain hidden. But you are strong, Daniel Cross, stronger than you knew, and that strength will serve us both well." I wanted to hate her, wanted to rage against this violation, this forced transformation, but I couldn't deny that part of me was exhilarated by what I was experiencing, by the power flowing through my veins, by the knowledge that I was seeing and touching things that no living person had witnessed in millennia. I was becoming complicit in my own enslavement, and the realization filled me with shame and a dark thrill that was almost worse than the fear. We finally emerged into a chamber that looked different from the others, more familiar, and with a shock I recognized it as another tomb, one I had catalogued 3 days earlier with Dr. Ahmadi, a minor noble's resting place that we had documented and moved on from, never suspecting that it connected to anything deeper. Nehebkara placed her hand against the far wall, and it shimmered like water, becoming translucent, and through it I could see the night sky, stars brilliant against the darkness, the familiar constellations that told me we were still in Egypt, still in the world I knew, though I felt fundamentally changed, irreversibly altered. "This is how we will leave," she said, "but not yet. First, you must rest, must allow the transformation to complete itself, must become fully what you are meant to be. And while you rest, I will extend my senses into the world above. We'll learn what has become of my land. We'll begin to plan our emergence and the reclamation of what was stolen from me." She touched my forehead, and exhaustion hit me like a physical blow. My enhanced body suddenly demanding the rest it needed to finish processing the changes she had wrought. I collapsed onto the stone floor, and she caught me with surprising gentleness, lowering me carefully, her movements almost tender, And it was this unexpected kindness that frightened me more than any threat could have. "Sleep, my first servant," she whispered, her cold fingers brushing hair from my forehead. "Dream of the glory that is to come, the world we will build together, the power we will wield. You have given me breath, and in return, I will give you eternity." I tried to fight the sleep, tried to keep my eyes open, but it was useless. And as consciousness faded, the last thing I saw was her face hovering over mine, beautiful and terrible and infinitely patient, the face of something that had waited 3,000 years and would wait 3,000 more if necessary to achieve its goals. That measured time in epochs rather than moments, and I realized with absolute certainty that I had become part of something vast and ancient and unstoppable, that my life as I had known it was over, and that whatever came next would reshape not just me, but possibly the world itself. I dreamed, and in my dreams, I saw her as she had been, a goddess in truth, worshipped by thousands, standing atop a ziggurat, while priests brought offerings of grain and gold and living breath, people willingly exhaling their last into vessels that were carried to her altar, giving her their life force, their vitality, their soul. I saw her power growing, saw her extending her influence across the ancient world, saw her temples rising in every major city, saw kings and queens bowing before her, saw her as more than a deity, but as a force of nature, beautiful and merciless and absolute. I saw the fear she inspired in the other gods, the jealousy of the priests who served them, and I saw the conspiracy that brought about her fall, a coalition of her rivals using forbidden magic to bind her, to seal her away, to strike her name from every monument and scroll, to erase her from history as if she had never existed. I saw her rage as the binding took effect, saw her swearing vengeance across millennia, saw her willing herself into a state of suspension, of hibernation, waiting with the patience of stone for the seals to weaken, for some unwitting soul to stumble into her prison and break the final ward. I saw myself through her eyes, saw my approach to the tomb, saw her will reaching out through the weakening seals, guiding my feet, causing the collapse that sent me tumbling into her chamber, orchestrating every moment to ensure that I would be the one to wake her, the one to provide the first breath of her resurrection. I had never had a choice, had been manipulated from the moment I set foot in the desert, a puppet dancing on strings I couldn't see. The realization should have filled me with fury, but instead, I felt only a strange acceptance, as if some part of me had always known this would happen, as if my entire life had been a preparation for this moment. When I woke, I found myself lying on something soft, and for a confused moment, I thought I was back in my tent at the expedition site, that everything had been a nightmare, brought on by too much sun and not enough water. But when I opened my eyes, I saw the stone ceiling above me, still glowing with that ethereal phosphorescent light, and I knew that nothing had changed, that the nightmare was real and ongoing and inescapable. I was lying on a bed that hadn't been there before, carved from stone but covered with fabrics that were impossibly soft, and beside the bed sat Neheb-Kara, watching me with those endless black eyes, her expression unreadable. "You dreamed," she said, "and it wasn't a question. You saw what I wished you to see, understood what I wished you to understand. Now you know the truth of what we are to each other, the destiny that has been written across the ages. Does it frighten you?" I considered lying, but I sensed she would know, would taste the falsehood on my breath, so I told the truth. "Yes, but not only fear. I feel other things too, things I don't want to feel, things that make me complicit in whatever you're planning." She smiled, and it was the first genuine smile I had seen from her. Not cruel or mocking, but something almost warm, almost human. Good. Fear without fascination is useless, and fascination without fear is dangerous for you. The balance between the two will keep you alive, keep you useful, keep you mine. Now come, it is time to ascend, to see what has become of the world in my absence. She rose and moved toward the shimmering wall, and I followed, my body responding to her unspoken commands, even as my mind still struggled with the implications of everything I had learned. She passed through the wall as if it were mist, and I hesitated for only a moment before following, feeling a strange tingling sensation as I crossed the threshold, as if I were passing through a veil that separated one reality from another. We emerged into the tomb I had recognized earlier, and through the entrance I could see the night desert, moonlight painting the sand silver, the familiar landscape of dunes and rocky outcrops that I had studied during the day. But everything looked different now, sharper, more vivid, my enhanced senses picking up details I would never have noticed before. The tracks of nocturnal animals, the subtle variations in the sand that indicated ancient structures buried beneath, the faint vibrations in the ground that spoke of water deep below the surface. Nehebkara stood at the entrance, her tall form silhouetted against the night sky, and as I watched, her bandages began to change, wrapping themselves more tightly around her body, forming something that almost looked like a dress, long and flowing, covering her strange metallic skin, making her appear more human, less obviously otherworldly. Her hair stopped writhing and fell in straight sheets down her back, still black as obsidian, but no longer moving independently. Her eyes were the only thing she couldn't change, still those endless black pools, but she produced a pair of dark glasses from somewhere within her wrappings and put them on, and suddenly she looked almost normal, almost like a very tall, very beautiful woman, rather than an ancient goddess of death and breath. "Adaptation," she said, noticing my surprise. "I can appear as I choose, can modify my form to suit my need. When we walk among mortals, I will seem as one of them. Unusual, perhaps, but not impossible, not obviously other. But you, my servant, you will remember what lies beneath this disguise, will never forget what I truly am." She stepped out into the desert, and I followed, feeling the cool night air on my skin, tasting the familiar scents of sand and stone, and the faint mineral tang that came from the distant Nile. In the distance, I could see the lights of our expedition camp, the tents and equipment still where we had left them, and I realized with shock that I had been gone only one night, that what had felt like days in the Undertemple had been mere hours in the world above, time flowing differently in that realm beneath the earth. "Your companions will be worried," Nehebkara said, her voice different now too, more human, less echoing and multiplied. "They will have searched for you, will assume you fell and were injured or killed. How will you explain your survival, your absence, your return?" I hadn't thought about that, hadn't considered the practical problems of rejoining the normal world after everything that had happened to me. What could I possibly say that would make sense? How could I explain the marks on my skin, the changes in my eyes that I could feel even if I couldn't see them, the aura of otherness that now clung to me like a second skin? I'll tell them I fell into a lower chamber, that I was unconscious for a while, that I found a way back up, I said, the lie forming easily, too easily, and I realized that was part of the change too, the ability to deceive without hesitation, without the usual moral qualms that would have made me stumble over the words. She nodded. "Please, good. You learn quickly, but we will not return to them tonight. First, there is something I must show you, something you must understand before we can proceed. Come." She began walking across the desert, her long strides eating up the distance, and I had to jog to keep up, my enhanced stamina allowing me to maintain the pace without becoming winded. We walked for perhaps half an hour before she stopped at a spot that looked no different from any other stretch of sand. But when she knelt and placed her hand flat against the ground, I felt a vibration, a pulse of power that rippled outward from her touch. The sand began to shift, flowing away like water, revealing stone beneath, and as more sand cleared, I saw that we were standing on top of a buried structure, a vast circular platform carved with the same symbols I had seen in her temple below. And at the center of the circle was a depression, a shallow bowl filled with something dark and viscous that gleamed in the moonlight. "A breathing circle," she explained, rising to her feet. "One of many that were scattered across my domain, places where my priests would gather the offerings of breath. where the faithful would come to give their vitality willingly in exchange for blessing, for healing, for the promise of favor in this life and the next. This one has not been used in 3,000 years, but the magic remains, dormant, waiting. Watch. She stepped into the circle, moving to stand at its center, directly above the bowl of dark liquid, and she raised her arms, her lips moving in silent words, and the symbols carved into the stone began to glow, faint at first, but growing brighter, and I felt the air change, felt it thicken and swirl, drawn toward her as if she were the center of a vortex. The dark liquid in the bowl began to bubble and steam, and from it rose tendrils of vapor that wound around her body, being absorbed into her skin, and as they did, she seemed to grow more solid, more present, more real, her form solidifying, her power intensifying until the air around her crackled with visible energy. She was feeding, I realized, drawing power from the remnants of ancient offerings that had been stored, preserved by the magic of the circle, waiting all these centuries for her return. The process took only minutes, but when it was complete, she looked different, more substantial, less like something that might fade if you looked away, and more like something that would endure forever. There are hundreds of these circles, she said, stepping out of the center, the glow fading as she released the magic, hidden throughout the desert, buried by time and sand, but not destroyed, not erased. Each one contains offerings that can sustain me, can restore my power, can make me strong enough to challenge those who would oppose my return. We will visit them all, will awaken each one, will draw on the accumulated faith of millennia until I am restored to what I once was. She looked at me, and even through the dark glasses I could feel the weight of her gaze. But that will take time, time during which we must remain hidden, must move carefully, must build our strength before revealing ourselves. You will be my agent in the world above, will gather information, will identify threats and opportunities, will prepare the way for my emergence. Do you understand? I nodded, still processing everything I was seeing, everything I was being told. But what about my life? My job? My friends? My family back home? I can't just disappear. You can, and you will, she said flatly. Your old life is over, Daniel Cross. You belong to me now, and your purpose is to serve my goals, not to maintain the comfortable fiction of normalcy. However, I am not unreasonable. You may maintain certain appearances, may continue to work with your expedition as long as it serves our purposes, may even contact your loved ones to allay their concerns. But you must never forget what you are now, what we are together, and you must never imagine that you can escape the bond that ties us. Where you go, I can follow. What you do, I can see. You are mine, utterly and completely, and the sooner you accept that, the easier your existence will be. There was no malice in her voice, no cruelty, just simple statement of fact. And somehow that made it worse, made it more final, more inescapable. I was no longer a person with agency, with free will, with the ability to choose my own path. I was an extension of her will, a tool to be used, a servant bound by magic I barely understood and couldn't hope to break. Now, she said, her tone shifting to something almost conversational, let us return to your camp. You have been gone long enough that they will be searching for you, and we don't want them to discover the tomb entrance, don't want them to stumble into my temple by accident. You will tell your story, will assure them that you are unharmed, and when the morning comes, you will guide them away from this place, will steer the expedition toward sites that are truly empty and harmless. Can you do this? Yes, I said, surprised at how easily the word came, how little resistance I felt to the idea of deceiving people who had been my colleagues and friends. The bond was changing me in ways I was only beginning to understand, reshaping my priorities, my loyalties, my very sense of self. We walked back toward the camp, and as we approached, Nehebkara stopped, staying in the shadows beyond the reach of the lights. I will wait here, she said. They cannot see me yet, cannot know of my existence. Go to them, play your role, and when the time is right, when we have gathered sufficient power, then we will reveal ourselves, and the world will tremble. This is your first test, Daniel Cross. Pass it, and prove yourself worthy of the gifts I have given you. Fail, and I will be forced to find another servant, and you will join my congregation of standing dead, aware but trapped, eternal and suffering. Do you understand? I understood, and the threat was clear enough to overcome any lingering thoughts of rebellion or betrayal. I nodded and walked toward the camp, leaving her in the darkness, feeling her eyes on my back, feeling the bond stretching between us like an invisible chain, and I knew with absolute certainty that she meant every word, that she would not hesitate to make good on her threats if I failed her. The camp was in chaos when I arrived, flashlights sweeping the area, voices calling my name, Dr. Ahmadi's distinctive accent shouting orders to the local workers who had overcome their superstitions enough to help search. I called out, making my voice sound weak and pained, and within seconds, I was surrounded by concerned faces, hands supporting me, questions coming too fast to answer. I told my prepared story, described the fall, the lower chamber, the hours of unconsciousness, the difficult climb back to the surface through a different passage. They believed me because they wanted to believe me, because the alternative was that they had lost a team member on their watch, a failure that would haunt the expedition and Dr. Ahmadi's career. They brought me water and food, checked me for injuries, expressed amazement that I had survived with only bruises and scratches, and I played the role of the lucky survivor, grateful and shaken and eager to put the whole experience behind me. But all the while, I felt her presence in the darkness beyond the lights, felt her satisfaction at my performance, felt the bond between us pulsing with approval, and I knew that I had passed the first test, had proven that I could lie convincingly, could function in the normal world while serving her hidden agenda. Over the following days, I maneuvered the expedition away from the dangerous tomb, suggested other sites that proved to be empty or previously looted, kept everyone busy and productive while ensuring they never got close to discovering what lay beneath the desert floor. And at night, when the others slept, I would slip away and meet Nehebkara at various locations, would help her locate the hidden breathing circle, would watch as she fed on the ancient offerings and grew stronger, more solid, more terrifyingly powerful. She taught me things during those nocturnal meetings, shared knowledge that no living person possessed, secrets of the ancient world, of magic and ritual, and the manipulation of forces that science had never named. I learned to read the old hieroglyphs, not just as language, but as code, as instructions for working with energies that permeated the world, invisible but ever-present. I learned to sense those energies, to manipulate them in small ways, to protect myself from harm, to influence the thoughts of others with subtle suggestions that they believed were their own ideas. I was becoming something other than human, not quite a god, but no longer entirely mortal, a hybrid creature that existed in the space between, and the transformation was addictive, intoxicating, terrifying. 3 weeks into the expedition, Dr. Ahmadi announced that we had completed our survey and would be returning to Cairo, and I felt a moment of panic, uncertain how I would maintain contact with Nehebkara in the city, how I would continue to serve her while pretending to resume a normal life. But she assured me that she would follow, that she could move through the world now with sufficient power to maintain her human disguise for extended period, that the city would actually serve our purposes better than the desert, providing more people, more breath, more opportunities to gather the strength she needed for whatever her ultimate plan might be. And so we returned to civilization, and I resumed my life while knowing it was all a facade, a performance for an audience that couldn't see the reality beneath. Nehebkara took an apartment in my building, appearing as a wealthy foreign woman, interested in Egyptian antiquities, and no one questioned her presence, her story, her right to be there. She was magnetic and charming when she chose to be, and people were drawn to her without understanding why, without sensing the danger that radiated from her like heat from a fire. The weeks turned into months, and I continued to help her locate and activate the breathing circle, some of which were hidden beneath modern buildings, beneath streets and parking lots, their magic still intact, despite the layers of civilization that had been built over them. She fed and grew stronger, and I felt her power increasing through our bond, felt myself changing further, becoming less human with each passing day, and I wondered if there would come a point where I was so transformed that I couldn't remember who I had been, couldn't recall the man named Daniel Cross, who had fallen into a tomb and woken something that should have stayed buried forever. One night, as we stood on the roof of my building, looking out over the glittering lights of Cairo, the Nile winding through the city like a dark serpent, she turned to me and spoke words that sent ice through my veins. "It's almost time," she said softly. "I have fed on hundreds of circles, have absorbed the breath of tens of thousands of ancient faithful, and I am approaching the strength I possessed at my height. Soon, very soon, I will be ready to make my presence known, to announce my return, to demand the worship that is my due. And when that moment comes, the world will have to choose, accept me and receive my blessings, or oppose me and face the consequences. There will be no middle ground, no neutrality, no hiding. Everyone will have to decide." She looked at me, and even in the darkness I could see the intensity in her eyes, the absolute conviction that what she was planning would come to pass. "And you, my first servant, you will stand at my right hand, will be my voice to the mortal world, will help me shepherd humanity into a new age, where the old gods walk among them once more. This is your destiny, Daniel Cross, the purpose for which you were chosen. Are you ready?" I wanted to say no, wanted to rebel, wanted to find some way to break free from her control and warn the world about what was coming. But the bond held me, and more than that, part of me wanted what she was offering, wanted the power and the knowledge and the immortality, wanted to be part of something greater than my mundane existence had ever offered. I was corrupted, compromised, transformed beyond recognition, and I had become complicit in my own enslavement. "Yes," I heard myself say, the word emerging from somewhere deep inside, from the part of me that had been rewritten by her magic, her will, her inexorable purpose. "I'm ready," she smiled, terrible and beautiful, and placed her cold hand against my cheek in a gesture that was almost tender. "Then let us begin," she whispered, and as she spoke, I felt the world shifting around us, felt the fabric of reality thinning, felt the ancient powers stirring in response to her call, and I knew that nothing would ever be the same again, that the age of men was ending, and something older, darker, and infinitely more powerful was rising to reclaim the earth. And I was the one who had made it all possible, the first breath of the apocalypse, the herald of the return of the gods, and there was no going back, no redemption, no escape, only the endless future stretching before us, filled with wonders and horrors in equal measure. And I stood on the precipice of that future, with a goddess at my side, and the weight of the entire world's fate resting on choices I had already made and could never unmake, bound forever to her will, her purpose, her terrible and magnificent vision of what was to come.